This conference will now be recorded.
Dr. Christie has a lot of information that she want to convey. I know when we had the meeting last month, I promised you that you will get a free book or two or four, because I just got the books in this week, and there's four books. There's two, the one for the last, what's the name of it exactly?
One of the books is College Planning Strategies. I wish someone had told me. And the
Hmm.
second book is College Funding Strategies. I wish someone had told me.
So those books are in, along with two workbooks, so that you can, I guess, they can duplicate the information in there. Um, is there? I know from the first book that I had that there was an option to download all the forms to my Google Drive. So that's what I would suggest, because that's what I did, and it works perfect. And it's so convenient once you put it in a Google Drive. But I'm going to not take too much time because time is precious. I want to again thank you all for joining, and I hope that you take a lot of notes. But I know all or most of what she's going to give you is in the book, and we're going to make arrangements with Miss Arcangelo to get you the books. I know I gave her a copy of them today, so she's excited, and we're all excited. And to Dr. Christie, thank you for being here, and thank you for just your commitment and your time.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar focused on college funding strategies to help you to graduate debt-free. So without further ado, please let me know if you cannot see my slides, but hopefully everyone can see them. One, we are recording this webinar so that we can make it available for students who were unable to attend. And if you have not already, please mute your line so that we can minimize any disruptions or background noise. And if you have any comments, please use the chat function and share your comments or questions throughout the webinar. Vanessa has a question in the chat already. Thank you, Vanessa, for kicking us off with questions, wanting to know if the Newark Tech students will also be receiving the book. Looks like that's a yes. Also, if you do have questions and you don't ask them up front, just know that you have plenty of opportunities at the end of the discussion to ask any questions you may have. The key objectives for tonight's webinar are to certainly make sure that we equip high school students and parents with useful and practical strategies to navigate through the college funding process so that you can make sure you understand what it takes to pay for college. I want to certainly make sure I provide information about searching and applying for scholarships. And I'll definitely share with you any COVID-19 implications that may pertain to college funding and scholarships. My intent is for this to be an interactive discussion. So please share your questions or comments throughout this discussion. So what am I going to cover tonight? I'm going to talk about understanding the different college funding stages, how to use your time wisely, making sure that you know the cost of attending college, how to pay for college, determining your financial need, how to apply for financial aid, and lastly, searching and applying for scholarships. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of background about myself, and I'll try to make it brief. Back in 1993, I was a high school senior. I was on my way looking to go to college and trying to narrow down my schools and figure out those great details that many of you are having questions about. I'm the youngest of three girls. I have a set of older twin sisters. And my mother and I had a lot of conversations around how to pay for school. And when I went to visit the college that I chose, which was the Hampton University, I asked my mother, I said, hey, Mom, I want to go to Hampton. I'm really excited about it. And she looked at me and said, hey, Hampton's a private school. It's very costly. What can we do to get you to pick a different school that's more affordable? I thought about it. I visited other schools, didn't really want to go. And so she and I had multiple conversations, and she finally said, hey, look, I'm happy to help you to get to Hampton, but we've got to figure out how we're going to pay for it. So that's really the theme of tonight's discussion. I will tell you that I ended up getting a scholarship, a full scholarship to college. It involved a full scholarship to college, summer internships every summer while I was in college, and a full-time job when I graduated from college. And one of the key reasons, there were multiple reasons why that happened. One of which, I had an exceptional school counselor who remembered I wanted to go to Hampton University and major in engineering. And so she actually introduced me to this particular scholarship. And secondly, when I recognized that the deadline only had like 24 hours to respond and submit that application by the deadline, I needed to have a system. Write that down, keep that in the back of your mind as you listen to me. What's your system? What's your approach to college planning and college funding? I was able to go home when I got that scholarship application. I was able to go home and pull from letters of recommendation I already had, essays, pre-drafted applications I could reuse information from, and I got that package mailed off. After 2 interviews later, I did get that scholarship. So I'm going to share with you some of those tips, and I also want to share with you that this whole process sometimes can be overwhelming. I know that because I am the parent of one student. Both my sons are either in college or on their way to school. The one on the left is in college. He's a sophomore. The one on the right, he's a high school senior. So I'm living through these experiences too. There's so much information. Sometimes it can be overwhelming and difficult to try to sift through what you specifically need so that it makes sense to what you're trying to accomplish. So let me try to help you as I share my personal experiences with receiving financial aid and scholarships, and also my experiences as a parent from both perspectives, sharing that with you. My son on the right, he's applying to colleges. Well, he's already applied to schools. He's gotten accepted into most of those he applied to, and he finally narrowed down his schools. And he's actually going to college on a Division I football scholarship and some academic scholarships. So there are many opportunities, and I want to make sure that you stay encouraged about what they are. As Ms. Robinson mentioned, if for those who had right at the beginning when we joined, she talked about 2 books that I wrote. And I wrote these books because I recognize that there are many students and parents who need access to information. They don't need to sift through the entire internet. They want to know, what are the cliff notes to getting into school and getting enough funding, or maybe enough funding that you don't have to pay anything out of pocket, or certainly take out student loans so that you can graduate debt free. So I wrote this book, College Funding Strategies. I wish someone had told me, so that it could be a resource to each of you to help you through the process. Once I wrote the book, I thought about it. And see, I'm one of those people that don't just give me a book to read. Give me the tools and the techniques and the resources in terms of templates to help me to be successful, help you to create that system approach I talked about. And with that, I also created an accompanying workbook to the book. In that workbook, there are 11 templates in the college funding template workbook. And these are all tools that you can use to help you with your specific college funding planning. You're going to hear me reference some of these templates throughout the discussion. And now when you see those templates pop up, you'll know where they came from. In that college funding book, I discussed 10 key strategies that I think are going to be very valuable to help each of you through your process. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm going to touch on some of these strategies throughout the discussion. I also want to bring your attention to this left bottom hand corner of the screen. You'll notice it says college funding. That's the book I'm referencing, and it'll give you the page number. So if I speak on a topic, there's a corresponding page number in my book where you may be able to reference it later. You'll know exactly where to reference it. All right, so we're going to talk through a little roadmap, a college funding roadmap. I'm going to start with assessing your current funding situation, and then we're going to talk about some of these other topics. So first up, we're going to make this a little bit interactive. I want you to use the chat function that you have. The first question I have isn't up here, but I'd love to get a sense of how many parents we have on tonight's call. So if you're a parent, just give me a yes in the chat function. If you are a student, let me know what grade you're in. So parents, just give me a yes or just say parent. And if you are a high schooler at a local school there, please let me know. Okay, great. We have 11th grader here. Let's see, how many, do we have any seniors? Okay, I have a student. Okay, I see students. If you're a student, let me know what grade you are. Okay, mostly juniors and sophomores so far. Excellent. A parent and a 10th grader are on. Good. More 11th graders. And keep it coming if you haven't shared with me already, because this is helpful for me to understand who's out there in the audience so that I can make sure I address some specific areas that you may have a need for. So thank you for that. So there's a good mix of students and parents so far on the webinar. Okay, we got a senior. Tammy is a senior, parent of a senior. Okay. So I will make sure I touch on some things that are applicable to each grade level. Now, this is one of the templates in my workbook. It is simply designed to get you to think about, where am I currently at in this college funding process? So if you're a sophomore or a senior, you're probably thinking about money. Seniors probably more urgently than sophomores, but sophomores are clearly at more of an advantage, because the earlier you get access to this information, the more time you have to plan and to make sure your financial needs are covered. So I'm going to run through these questions. A couple of them I may ask you to respond to in the chat, but I want you to think about them as I'm asking them. Number one, what's your GPA? What's your child's GPA? Does every parent and every student on this webinar know your current grade point average? After every semester, and I'll give you little anecdotes about what I did with my sons throughout this talk. After every semester of high school, I was reaching out to find out, good Vanessa, to find out what my son's current grade point average was. Very important, because if you don't know, you can't influence what you don't know. If you need to change your child's, or if you're a student, if you need to change your workload or your courses for next year, if you need to get a tutor, if you need to get in more challenging classes, it gives you every advantage to make sure that you are on track with your college goals and with your anticipated grade point average. Please make sure you understand how to get your transcripts and how to get your GPA from your high school, even as a sophomore. Number two, what do you plan to major in? So if you're a student, let me know in the chat what you're thinking about majoring in. It doesn't have to be 100% nailed down, but if you have any thoughts on that right now, please share that in the chat. And parents, if you think you have an idea of what your child may want to study, share that too. Okay, I'm seeing some STEM majors coming in: science, veterinarian science, architecture. Okay, excellent. Let me know what you're thinking about. Electrical engineer. All right, Tammy, I'm an electrical engineer by background. Okay, excellent. I see several. Finance, okay, pharmacy, excellent. Computer science, all phenomenal choices. There is no wrong answer to that question. Number three, what type of college are you considering? Are you considering a 2-year school, like a trade school or vocational school? Are you considering a 4-year school? Are you considering going to a public school versus a private school? Those questions all matter. You're probably thinking, what does this stuff have to do with funding? You'll find out in just a minute. They're all interlinked with each other. The more you make these earlier decisions, the better off you'll be to getting enough funding you need to go to school. There's a difference in how public schools and private schools, how to fund those and how much they cost. And there are different opportunities based on what you want to major in, for example. Number four, do you want to live on campus or off? Number five, how much does it cost to attend college for 1 year? How many students know how much it costs? If you're thinking of a college, I want to go to Hampton University. Well, then I may ask myself, well, what does Hampton cost for 1 year? 20,000, 30,000, 40,000? Make sure you're thinking about how much it costs. What is your parents' household income? How many students know how much money their parents make a year? Don't give me the number in the chat. Just say yes if you do. And then number seven, how much have you or if you're a parent saved for college? Are you and your parents working actively saving money, have a savings plan, have other stocks and bonds and other initiatives in place for college? If the answer is yes, fantastic. If the answer is not so much, that's okay too. That's hence the reason why we're here having this discussion. Don't feel like you're behind the curveball. It is what it is, and there's still many of opportunities in front of you. Number 8, have you had conversations about how to pay for college? How many of y'all students are saying, Mom and Dad, what's our plan? Hey, Mom, I'm interested in going to college. Dad, I'm thinking about going to college. I'm thinking about majoring in veterinarian science, for example. And I'm thinking about these schools. See how all these different pieces are interrelated? And this is how much it may likely cost. What do you think about how we're going to cover that? And have some real conversations. And then number 9, how much have you budgeted for your senior year expenses? I hope you are budgeting for those, because that is a very important aspect of getting ready to go to college. We'll talk more about it. Now, once you have assessed your current funding situation, I want you to think about where you are in terms of what stage. Most of you, and I'm going to skip down to that, the one that's in that dotted box, are in the late stage. It's not, don't be alarmed by the terminology late, but I refer to it as the late stage in my book. This is when you're in the 8th to 12th grade and you have less than 5 years or less before it's time for you to go to college. Some of you may be seniors, so it'll be less than a year. Some of you may be sophomores. You may have 2 years to plan or more. And so that's the stage we're going to focus on in tonight's conversation, because this is the stage where you should be looking at your income. This is when you should be saving some money. You may not have as much saved by the time you go to college, but it's not too late to still save some money. And I would highly encourage everyone to start doing so if you aren't. And then you should also be thinking about scholarships, grants, and financial aid. And we're going to talk about some of those things. Now, as we tee up this whole conversation about money, the first thing that I think is important for you to know is the cost of attendance. What does that mean, Miss Christie? It simply means, how much is college going to cost? You have to think about how much a school is going to cost when you're picking a school. What I tell students is, make sure that you pick schools in different price ranges so that you can make an educated and informed decision based on how much financial aid you may receive or how much money out of pocket you have to contribute. You shouldn't pick all high colleges and apply to no medium cost or lower cost colleges, and then you get to the end of your senior year or in the middle of your senior year and realize, I can't afford any of these schools. Oh my God, what am I going to do? I didn't apply anywhere else. So pick schools, start researching colleges, important part of the process. Well, you may ask, well, what are the different type of costs? What are these costs you're talking about? They fit into really 2 categories. There's direct costs, and these are funds that you will pay directly to the college or university. It could be tuition, fees, the cost that it takes to pay for your courses, room and board if you're going to live on campus, your dormitory fees, your housing, your food, eating in their different facilities. Those are direct costs. We're going to give that money straight to the college, university. And then there are also indirect costs. These are costs that you don't give to the school, but you still have to be responsible for paying, such as books, course materials, school supplies, computers. You may have personal expenses like your laundry, cell phone bill, and then transportation. How am I going to get back and forth? Do I need a car? Oh, am I going to school on the East Coast, but I live on the West Coast? So now you have to get travel, airline tickets. So all those things that you are still responsible for. So either with direct costs and indirect costs, you have to put those together to really get a sense of what it costs to attend college. I'll tell you that each year the cost to attend college increases because of inflation. However, right now with the COVID-19 pandemic situation, many students are virtual, and that is giving them some financial relief because they don't have to travel. They don't have to stay in the dorm. Some students are still on campus, but many students, like my college student, he's here home with me now and not on campus. So it cut his cost of attendance in half because he doesn't have room and board. He doesn't have to pay to stay on campus. So that's actually making it a bit more affordable right now. And then some colleges are more expensive than others. But here's the key takeaway from me. Go where you can afford. Don't put such a heavy burden on yourselves and on your parents that you don't go where you can afford. There are over 2,000 colleges and universities in the United States. There are plenty of outstanding colleges, and you can get a quality education. And so if you can't afford it, look for other affordable schools. Now, I also talk about public in-state schools, public out-of-state schools, and private schools. As you can see here, public schools in general are schools that receive funding from federal and state governmental entities for the majority of their funding. And so they're governed by state and federal laws. Their tuition rates are usually cheaper. As you can see here in this U.S. News chart here, the public in-state schools, so if you're an in-state student and you live in the state of New Jersey and you decide to go to school in New Jersey to a public school, it's generally the most affordable. If you go to a public school, let's say it's here in Virginia where I am, it's usually a little bit more expensive if you're coming from New Jersey. And if you decide to go to a private school, and private schools don't get their funding, most of their funding from federal entities, they get much of their funding from alumni, endowment, fundraising, and student tuition, direct tuition payments. Those schools are generally a little bit more costly, or a lot more costly, as you can see from this chart. So when I asked that question before, do you want to go to a public school or a private school? Hopefully you're able to see the correlation between, or the differentiation between those schools, and now how much they may vary in cost. Now, I'm going to pause, and forgive me if I cough a little or if I take breaks. I'm just getting over COVID, and so I am a little bit still having some respiratory issues with that. So my apologies, and I'll try not to as much as possible. Now, we've talked about knowing the cost of attendance. Now, here's what I want to tell you too. Now that you know how much it costs to go to college, how long you stay in college matters too. So let's say you decide, I'm going to go to a 4-year college. I'm going to go to Princeton University, for example, and I'm just making up a school. Time is money. If you're going to go to Princeton and work on a 4-year degree, or any school and work on a 4-year degree, and you take longer than 4 years to get the 4-year degree, it is going to cost you more money. That's why I say time is money. If you go to school in 4 years, public school is probably going to be about 35%, private school 53%, percentage of students completing it in that time period. But as you can tell, the cost is going to increase substantially as you take longer to get that 4-year degree. So when you're in school, and like I tell my sons, don't just go to college, go and graduate on time, because it's costing us money. So now that you know generally how to think about picking a school and paying attention to how much that cost of attendance is, the next question I have for you is, what is your plan to pay for it? Let's talk about customizing your funding plan or approach. How are you going to put together a plan to pay for college? The first thing I'll tell you, if you're going to talk about your approach, you need to think about having a plan. This seems very oversimplified and almost sarcastic as I say it that way, but it's not meant to be sarcastic. But you wouldn't believe how many students and parents get involved in this process and have no plan. They're just winging it year after year, going as the wind blow with their whole college planning and funding effort, and they don't make a deliberate strategic attempt. You can put together a plan that is both effective and simple, but it's very useful. Remember I told you my situation with getting to college on scholarship? I had a system, I had a plan, and I would encourage you to do so. This is one of the first templates, or actually the second template in my book I'm introducing, and it's called the College Funding Plan. You'll notice it has information on here. What are your goals? What type of goal is it? How much is it going to cost you? Cost is a very important factor, if not for the students, but for parents. Parents in the chat, let me know if cost is important to you. Also, you want to track what's the start date, when you're going to start the activity. All right, I'm getting some yeses. I'm getting some yeses with an exclamation point in all caps. So I'm telling you, it's important to parents. So you want to think about how much it's going to cost, when you need to start that activity, when does that activity need to be complete, and then what percentage you complete. Some things may take a little time to fully complete. So are you 25% complete, you're halfway there, or more than half? And then any other notes, capture those in one place. Parents, I can't tell you how important it is to have, if you're sitting down with your sophomore And I would encourage it every year. Your student is in school, you pull out this plan during the summertime and you map out what you and your child want to get accomplished that year. And you update this plan at least annually and as things change. Now, I'll tell you, my son, we had a plan. Both my sons had a plan like this. Very simple. We didn't overly complicate it. It got to a great point where they were updating it themselves as high school students. That's how simple it should be. But my son, who's a senior now, he applied to 13 schools. Here's why I tell you cost and budgeting is important even as you enter your senior year. Guess how much it costs for him to pay application fees for 13 schools? Anybody want to render a guess in the chat? Let me know. All right, I'll give it 3 more seconds. Emily says 1,300. Tammy says 1,000. Vanessa says 400. And I'm going to tell you what, you guys aren't too far off. It was $980. So if I was giving out prizes, it would go to Tammy. $980 just on application fees. Now, let me give you an idea. If you are a sophomore or a junior and you have time to plan and budget for some of these costs, you had all the application fees, you have SAT test or prep if they decide to prep leading up to their senior year. You have your senior fees with your high school, cap and gown, senior pictures, housing deposits, and the list can go on. Very important for you as a student and as a parent to be thinking about the cost. You see in number 6 on this plan, create a planning budget. You need a budget for these activities, so don't leave that out. So we've talked about putting a plan in place. Everything else I'm going to discuss goes on your plan. So if you're thinking about putting the plan in place and you hear me say something later on this talking like, oh, you know what? Let me make a note to add that to my specific college plan, because it may be something that you'll need to revisit. So now that you have a plan, let's talk about the different types of ways you can pay for college. The first category are called household sources, whether it's you, the parents, you, the students, or scholars, as I refer to them in my book, because I think all students should be scholars or refer to themselves as scholars. It's money that you're going to pay, whether it's out of your own pocket, whether it's from a college savings plan, which I talked about earlier, whether some parents tap into their permanent life insurance. I didn't take that approach with my child, but I do know parents who are able to use their permanent life insurance policies to help offset these costs for college. So that may be available to you. And then your retirement plan, parents. I don't advocate and recommend it. I think this should probably be your last resort, because this retirement is for your future. And you don't want to rob yourself of funding that can be growing over the next 4 years. So that's household sources. Next, we're going to talk about outside sources, colleges, employers, organizations, whether they're for-profit or nonprofit, or individuals, who aren't related to the student or the scholar. Anybody outside of your household is considered an outside source. That funding could come in the form of financial aid, scholarships, grants, or any type of employer educational reimbursement initiatives they may have. Now that you know the two, do I want to pay for it out of pocket or through my household sources, or do I want to look for external sources? So that is something I want you to think about as we talk about financial aid. Now, how many of you have heard of financial aid? And if you don't know what it means, it simply means money that's available to help pay for college. Usually from outside sources. I could actually add outside sources to that sentence. In terms of federal financial aid, the federal government awards over $120 billion a year to over 13 million students to go to college. $120 billion in financial aid. What are those different types of financial aid? There's work study. A student can work on campus while they're in school and have some of their tuition, room and board expenses covered through that work study funding. Grants and scholarships, which I consider gift aid, because it's money you do not have to work for or money you do not have to pay back. Best types of financial aid, in my opinion. And lastly, student loans. Student loans is funding that you can get from either a federal institution or a private bank or lender, and it encompasses paying back the money that you borrow with interest over time, and it can get kind of costly. Now, student loans, let's talk about that for a minute. According to the U.S. Department of Education, there's over $1.6 trillion outstanding in student loan debt in the United States. 1.6 trillion. 45 million people have student loan debt currently. And know that the average student loan debt is roughly $32,731 per individual. $32,000 in the average student loan debt. It could be higher for some or lower for others, but this is the average. So what do I advocate for? As much as possible, if you can avoid or minimize your student loan debt, I would strongly encourage you to do so. Now, here's a little chart I added recently to my slide deck. Fortunately, I don't see New Jersey in the top 10. So you guys are doing something right. Either you're not going to school or you're finding some creative ways to pay for it. But this is a top 10 list of states that have some of the highest student loan debt. California, Texas, Florida, etc. I just did a webinar on Georgia for a Georgia audience recently, and then they were kind of shocked to see themselves on that list. But this is something just as a reinforcement of, student loan debt is real. So as you think about student loans, and student loans are a type of financial aid, just like scholarships, just like grants and work study. And I'm not saying it's a bad word, but I'm saying if at all possible to reduce or minimize your use of student loans, the better off you'll be positioned for the 4 years you're in college and beyond. And that's the goal, is to try to graduate from college debt-free. So how do you get financial aid? You have to fill out the free application for federal student aid. FAFSA is what you'll hear me refer to it as. It's required. If you ever want to get a penny of federal funding, you must have the FAFSA filled out. It's used by colleges and universities to determine how much money they're going to give a student in financial aid. Each college will use the information from your FAFSA, and they will calculate their financial aid package all differently. Each school will calculate, you'll get a separate award letter from each college, and your numbers, don't expect your numbers from one college to look exactly like your financial aid numbers from another college. It's not really realistic, because they're going to calculate it based on their financial algorithms and policies. Now, the FAFSA opens up every October 1st of each academic year. So each October, so answer me this question in the chat. When should you apply if you're in high school? And you're a high school senior more specifically, when should you apply for financial aid? Fill out this FAFSA form. Let me know. When do you think a high school senior should do it? In the fall? In the spring? Okay. Brenda says in October. And she or he, if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, October. You both are absolutely correct. October. Here's why. ASAP, Vanessa says. So if you're a senior and you haven't, when you get off this webinar with me tonight, log into the free application for federal student aid and get it done. If you're a senior, for sure. It's free to do. And here's why I recommend doing it as early as possible with ASAP, as Vanessa said, because each college gives out their money on a first come, first served basis. If you apply for that college in the fall, and if you fill out your free application for federal student aid that fall, you're likely to get an award letter while they still have money available to award. If you wait till May and you're a senior, you're going to be getting whatever's at the bottom of the barrel. And you want to give yourself as much opportunity to get financial aid and to figure out your next recourses as possible. Seniors, apply as soon as possible. And here's something very important to note for all parents and students. This is not a one-time exercise. If you are planning to go to college, you have to complete a FAFSA every single year until you graduate from college, unless you don't want money. But if you expect financial aid each academic year, And each academic year, you must complete a new FAFSA or it's called a renewal. You renew your FAFSA each year while you're in school. How many of you did not know that? Did anybody know that in the chat? And look, I always get this question too. Well, Miss Christie, do I have to fill out the FAFSA if I already have a full scholarship? Absolutely. Yes, you do. If you have student loans, if you have scholarships, if you're paying for it out of pocket, yes, you please fill out your FAFSA each year. Now, here's the website link to it. It's an online application. When you sit down to do it, you'll need your tax documents, both students and parents, particularly if students have worked or they have assets or income, substantial income. You'll need your W-2s if you've both worked, your bank documents and statements, and any other documentation that may be financial in nature that they may require. Both the student and the parent has to create a federal student aid ID account. Both of you have to sign documents electronically throughout the process. And here's why knowing which colleges you want to attend is helpful. So here's the message. If a senior has to fill out the FAFSA by October 1st, then that means seniors have to know where they want to go to college before their senior year. So all my sophomores and juniors, you should be making it your business. Use these phones for more than just on TikTok, which I've been on recently a lot, watching a lot of nonsense, and other social media platforms. Get on here and do some research and narrow down which colleges, what majors you want to pursue, because you're going to have to provide it to those colleges come October 1st and come the fall of your senior year when you're applying to schools. Each school that you apply to, parents, you have to send your FAFSA scores to. And I say your FAFSA scores, but it's really your FAFSA documentation. You'll go, when you're filling out this application, it'll ask you which colleges, which college codes do you want us to send this information to? You have to know which those lists of schools are to add those. If you don't add them, the school will not have your personal income information, and you will not be getting an award letter from them until you have completed it. It will create a report, and it will show your calculated expected family contribution, or you'll hear me refer to it as an EFC on it. Now, what the EFC is it's the amount of money that they calculate that a family can pay out of pocket. This is how much they think each academic year you can pay. Whether it's $2,200 or $22,000. The lower your EFC, the lower the amount they think you can afford to pay, the more money you get in financial aid. The more money they think you can pay, the less financial aid you're likely to get, because they're like, oh, they can cover it themselves. May not be your reality, but important to know how that's done. Now, I will also tell you that colleges will use that EFC, and how that EFC is calculated. There's 7 factors that go into that calculation. There's the parent income, whether it's your taxable income with the IRS or other untaxable income. They'll look at that. They'll look at the number of people in the student's household. They'll look at the scholars in college, how many students are in college in that household. They'll look at the scholar's income. If you're a student and you're working, they'll look at all your income except work study. They won't count work study, but they'll look at your income and factor that into how much money they think you can pay. And then they'll look at your parent assets. If you own homes, boats, private jets, stocks, bonds, whatever those things are. And same with the student, they'll look at your assets, and then they'll factor in the age of the oldest parent. So these are the 7 things that they'll ask questions about on your application. They'll do some calculations, and then they will spit you out an EFC number. Now, I am going to introduce 2 tools here. I'm not going to talk a lot about them, but I want to just expose you to these 2 tools. Let's say you want to get a general idea of your EFC before your senior year, and before you have to get an official EFC. I would encourage you to do so. Use one of these tools to pre-calculate it out. It'll give you an estimate. Here's why. You may want to reach out to a financial planner professional to see how your assets impact your EFC. If there are legal and moral ways to reduce your EFC through financial and tax and other savings plans and other investment approaches that are legal, you want to give yourself time to maximize your opportunities before you have to complete your FAFSA. So these are 2 tools that help you to do that. So all this talk about FAFSA, what are we doing with this? What does this really mean? I'm going to follow you through this. I didn't always have this diagram, but it helps me to even explain it. So it may actually help you to see it. First, you and your parent are going to sit down and fill out that FAFSA, which I talked about on the left in that blue box. Then once you fill it out, you're going to select the colleges, and those colleges are going to get sent your EFC. Once those schools get your EFC, you'll get it. You'll get your EFC. I think it's a confirmation email or letter that you'll get, and it'll show you what your expected family contribution is. They're going to also send that information to the colleges in the pink area. Once the colleges get it, we're going to move to the green box. The colleges are going to do their own internal calculations based on the policies, and they are going to send you an award letter. It's going to contain your financial aid. So in the purple box, it gets sent to you, and you're going to open it up, look at it, and then you're going to determine how much money they're giving you in your financial aid package, whether it's loans, work study, scholarships, or grants. And then they'll tell you, here's your cost of attendance, and here's how much we're not covering, and you better figure it out yourself. That's in that orange box, the out-of-pocket expenses. The part that's not covered by financial aid. How are you going to pay for it? So the question is, do you have enough money after looking at your award letter? If the answer to that question is yes, fantastic. If the answer is no, then I would suggest that you and I have a conversation about scholarships. Now, here's what I'll tell you before I talk a little bit about scholarships and grants. You want to look for money to help offset it. Here's the not so ideal situation from getting that award letter. In this blue section, let's just say you get your award letter back and your blue section, which is your out-of-pocket expenses, is very large. That's not the best ideal situation for you because that's the amount you're going to have to pay, or either you're going to have to owe if you take out a lot of student loans. Now, what's more ideal? How about where 75% of the majority of that financial aid comes in gift aid, such as scholarships and grants? That's ideal because you will pay or owe the least out of your own pocket. That's where I want to see most students. That's why what I'm sharing you is very valuable. So here's why I focus on scholarships. Scholarships are a phenomenal way to get funding for college that you don't have to pay back. There are thousands of sources, whether it's colleges and universities or other private entities who are gifting money to students, giving charitable acts to students to help offset those costs. Don't just approach scholarships from a willy-nilly standpoint. Oh, my friend sent me this scholarship, I'm going to apply. Oh, that's it. Only apply for that one. Wrong answer. You should have a plan. You should have a systematic approach. My son and I have a systematic approach, my high school senior. We look for scholarships every week. We apply for scholarships every week. We have a plan about how we're going to handle that. We're targeting scholarships of various amounts. You will find that there are scholarships as low as $20 and as high as 20, 30, 40, or full ride scholarships. Target a variety of different scholarships because the money will add up. And you don't know which ones will say yes to you and which ones will say no. So the more you apply, the more you increase your probability of getting awarded scholarships. Don't limit where you're willing to apply. Don't just look at all the national or just the local scholarships. Mix it up a bit. I will give you a key tip though. Local scholarships are usually underapplied for. Not many people apply for local scholarships. So, and I'll give you an example. I'm an Alpha Kappa Alpha. I'm an AKA, my sorority. My local chapter has a scholarship. You know how many students applied this year? Less than 20 total. And we had 4 categories. Less than 20 students applied for 4 categories of scholarships. What does that tell you? Though somebody in that 20 has a high probability of getting awarded a scholarship. So the more you can find local scholarships, whether it's nonprofits, organizations, Greek organizations, religious organizations, employers, They all are great sources of scholarships. So somebody asked a question, what kind of things are they looking for when someone applies for a scholarship? Stand by. I will give you more insight on that in just a minute. The other thing I'm going to tell you is, before I get to that question, is find a scholarship mentor. I met a young lady named Maya Mundale, and you can look her name up or Google her. She received over $1 million awarded in scholarships, $1 million. Relentless in her pursuit, and it paid off. I had coffee with her one day. I had just met her. Somebody introduced me to her, and I was like, you know what? I have got to talk to this young lady. And I asked her, how did she do it? What was one of those big aha moments for her? And she had applied for the Bill and Melinda Gates scholarship and many others. And she said, I applied and I got the scholarship. And she said, here's how. I went to their website and I looked at previous scholarship recipients. And they usually put the students who had previously won on their websites. She found out how to reach out to them on social media, I presume. And she contacted several and say, hey, I'm curious to find out and learn from you. Congratulations on receiving the scholarship. And I want to know, well, how did you do it? What did you do? She used them as a scholarship mentor. What did you put in your essay? What kind of letters of recommendations did you have? How did you differentiate yourself? And they were able to help her. Don't run from the essays. Make sure that you don't overlook those scholarships. And right now, during COVID-19, most scholarships have essays. Why? Because their SAT tests they may not accept or many students aren't taking. So there's one less factor that they're able to use to decide who to give their funding to. So that means they're putting more weight on essays. So don't run from those. Also, make sure you read directions and you provide them back all the documentation that they requested. You leave out one piece of documentation and your application will not get reviewed. The first thing people do when they evaluate college applications and scholarship applications is they do a checklist. Did you give me everything? Is everything in your package what I asked for? If the answer is no, you know what they're going to say? Discard. They're not going to say, oh, let me come back to this later. They're going to say, nope, I don't have time for this. They can't even follow directions. And the last thing I'll say is track your scholarship progress. And we're going to talk about that. But here's what I'll tell you. There are lots of scholarships out there, whether they're need-based, based on your financial need. If you have a low EFC and they don't think you can pay a lot out of pocket for college, you're going to qualify for need-based scholarships. So that's why I'm asking the questions. Do you know you and your parents' income, household income? Do you know what that situation looked like? Use that EFC calculator to get an estimate so you can start to be more strategic and deliberate about, do I have a financial need based on my initial assessment of that? And let me start looking for those kind of scholarships. There are also merit-based scholarships or interest-based scholarships. Now, merit-based scholarships are academics. They're based on your academic grades and performance, your test scores like the SAT and the ACT. And many colleges and universities have merit scholarships, and a lot of private entities have merit-based scholarships. Also, make sure that you check out interest-based scholarships. Many different interests. If you're left-handed or right-handed, or if you're disabled, or if you wear glasses, or if you're blind, or if you have diabetes, or if you are the parent of the child of someone who died in a war, or if you can play a musical instrument, or you're talented with the arts. There are so many different scholarships. If you name a category, I guarantee you, if you searched it, there's a company scholarship for some unique aspect about who you are. Look for those unique aspects. Military and ROTC scholarships. My cousin, he's like a nephew to me because he's much younger. He just graduated a year ago from Hampton University with a full naval ROTC scholarship. He received that scholarship. They paid for all 4 years of his school at Hampton. They gave him a stipend, which was kind of a monthly income to go to school. And when he graduated from college, he got commissioned as an officer in the U.S. Navy. Tuition paid for, debt free, and a job. So don't close your mind off to those possibilities that may exist. And then there's athletic scholarships. My son is an example of that. He just received a full football, Division I football NCAA scholarship. So there are a lot of different opportunities out there, and I certainly don't want you to be discouraged. So Here's a question I get, Miss Christie, I don't know where to find scholarships. Can you send me some? I can send you some scholarships. Here's what I'll tell you. It's never going to be an exhaustive list. There are so many out there. If you Google it, and I tell students, Google and parents, Google should be your best friend. Why? Because of all those other interest areas I just described. Miss Christie doesn't know your major. I saw someone who wanted to be an architect. Well, guess what? Google scholarships for architect majors. Google scholarships for veterinarian sciences. Google whatever your interests, majors are, etc., and look for the funding. Here's some other categories that I just listed here, where if you Google these things, you would be surprised what type of opportunities are out there. All right. So here's what I want to say. Here's other places to find scholarships. Your high school counseling office. Now, I'm curious about Newark Tech, I thought I saw, and West Caldwell students, both alike, and any other local schools. How many of you are getting information from your school counselors? I know, Miss Tammy, you said you're the parent of a senior. Are you guys getting information from your school counselor on where to get scholarships? Because I know my son's high school, their school counseling office is sending them out weekly. That's an excellent source. Okay, good. So Tammy says, absolutely. Don't overlook those emails when they come in. Take them serious and pay attention to them. Also, I am listing here because there are a lot of great websites and web portals where you can sign up, create an account, put in your personal information. I want to major in engineering. I want to do this. I want to do that. And it will filter out scholarships that apply to your situation. So I'm listing a whole list of those here. There are many others, but this will give you a great example and a start. Now, as Ms. Robinson mentioned earlier, down here in green, if you go to my website, investinothers.com/scholarship list, you will also see scholarships that I hear about that I try to keep up to date, but it's still never up to date because every time I update it, I get a whole bunch more scholarships that I hear about. So there's a list there for you too to get you started. Now, I mentioned earlier tracking your progress. Here's what I mean by that. When you're applying to for scholarships, you're going to get, and when you're searching for scholarships, you're going to get a lot of scholarships you may qualify for. Well, where are you tracking and putting all those scholarships at? Do you have a list? Here's part of my system. Here's what this is another template that I would encourage you to adopt some version of it where it makes sense for you. Have a place where you can document your scholarships, the link to them, the eligibility requirements, the award amounts, the deadlines, very important, whether they require essays or not, letters of recommendation, test scores, and make sure that you track all those details in one place. Why? So that when you and your parents sit down, like me and my son, we do roughly every week, every 2 weeks, we pull out his list like this, and all the ones that we've already applied for, I highlight that whole row yellow, and then I'm going down. And I also list them in a chronological order based on the date in which their applications are due. So those that we completed in January and February and March of this year, they're at the top of his list. So as I go further down the list, the deadlines are in June, July, August, etc. So you'll be able to track those things and keep yourselves current and focused on what you need to do next. Now, Vanessa asked, are you able to use Google Docs? Are you able to use Google Docs or Sheets? This is an Excel spreadsheet. I'm sure you can create the same thing in Google Docs if it is, are your trackers able to use in Google Docs? Possibly. I'm sure you can convert it to a Google document. I created it in Microsoft Excel. So there's a lot of synergies and interactions, and that's not the word I'm looking for, integration between Microsoft and Google Docs. So I believe you probably can. All right. Next, so have some sort of tracking mechanism. You can use this one. You can create your own, whatever works for you. I would highly recommend that. And so now that you're starting to look for scholarships, narrow it down based on your major, other interests, and you're finding all those scholarships, what happens when you're ready to start applying for scholarships? I want to make sure that you recognize the different parts of the application. So I'm going back to an earlier question when someone asked, what are they looking for with scholarships? They're looking for these areas here. They want to know your financial needs. So they're going to be looking at your financial documents. They're going to be making assessments and decisions about whether or not you can afford to pay out of pocket or if you need financial help. So you're going to look for tax documents, your expected family contribution, your FAFSA information, for example. That's one area. They may look at your SAT and ACT test scores. They are definitely going to look at your GPA. Some scholarships have a minimum GPA requirement, 3.0, 3.5, 2.5, 2.0. It varies, but you should certainly have your transcripts and your grade point average available at all times while you're in high school. Because if you don't know your GPA, how do you know which scholarships you should even apply for if you meet their minimum requirements? So you should have that handy. If you're a senior and the scholarship entity wants to know if you've already picked a school, they may likely, or you've applied to colleges, they'll ask you for your college acceptance letter or verification of enrollment if you're a current college student. They'll ask you to write an essay. We've talked about that. They may ask you for letters of recommendation. They'll ask you to specify what other activities, extracurricular, leadership, community service, what have you been involved in? And then I'll talk about the scholar profile, which I highly recommend. And it's something that's probably unique to my particular systematic approach that I would invite you to consider. But the key takeaway here is people are looking to give their money to well-rounded students. And right now with the pandemic, they're thinking the SAT scores may not necessarily be a factor, because I'm starting to see this with my son. A lot of scholarship entities are not requiring SAT scores. So let me ask the question. Let me know in the chat if you have the answer to this question. If they're not requiring SAT and ACT test scores, where are they putting their emphasis? Which part of the application do you think scholarship entities are putting their emphasis? How are they going to narrow down who they're going to give their money to? They're looking at your GPA, right? They're looking at essays. They're looking at community service. They're looking at your letters of recommendation. Absolutely. Because here's why. They want to know more about who you are as a person, whether or not you are someone who is worthy of their funding. So I would encourage you as much as possible to really upsell yourself in every way you can on paper. One key way of doing it is with the scholar profile. Now, if you've been to my previous chat that Ms. Robinson hosted back, I want to say in March, we talked about this scholar profile. But if you haven't, let me introduce you to it. It's really like a one-page resume. Highly recommend it. And it is a great opportunity for you to differentiate yourself from the competition. It's one of the templates in my book, and it is an easy to use one-page summary of your goals, your accomplishments, and what you want to do moving forward. Now, it could contain these 10 or 11 items on the left. You could have a professional picture. That's usually optional. You would have your name and contact information, your objective. What do you want to major in college? What college do you want to attend? Your educational summary. What are those things you want to highlight about high school? Your grade point average, your test scores, for example. Any honors and awards, employment experiences, extracurricular activities, community service activities, relevant courses. Like if you're going to major in, if you want to go to school pre-med, you want to highlight your chemistry and physics and anatomy and biology courses here, for example. Things that relate back to what you want to major in. And then interest and hobbies. Now, you're probably thinking, well, why do I need that if I'm filling out the application? Because it has so much more value than just for the application. You can use it to give someone who's writing a letter of recommendation for you, and they may only know you from a limited capacity, but by having this one-page resume-like document, they're able to learn that much more about you just like that. And they can write a more powerful letter for you. Second way, you can attach it to a college application or a scholarship application if they allow you to attach additional documents. I don't encourage it if they say, we only want the documents that we specified. This is not likely one that they're going to specify. But, I just did have a situation with my son's scholarship, one scholarship recently. They asked him for all these things, and it wasn't on their application. So you know what I did? Most people would have to create this in that situation. I didn't have to. I only had to attach. Please put your phone on mute to minimize background noise. Michelle, see, we're getting background noise. Thank you. All right, so I would highly recommend that you create one. And the last way to create and to really value add having a scholar profile is when you're writing essays. Have you ever sit down to write something about yourself and now you're trying to remember all these different things you've done and you don't remember when you did them or how they interrelated to other things? Well, having this one-page scholar profile, and it looks like this when it's complete, will help you. You can give it to someone else, you can add it to an application, or you can use it for your own internal purposes. I even use it when I help my son. And so it is a great snapshot for even parents to be able to say, now, what did you do? Now, what did he say his GPA was? And if you'll notice here under the educational section, it even has a place for their class rank. I've had at least 5 occasions in the last month where scholarships asked me what my son's class rank was. Now, it's not something I think about every day. So having it here was a great way for me not to have to try to go and spend more redundant time hunting it down. So now that you have a scholar profile built, I would also encourage you, and I'm going to talk about each part of that scholarship application just briefly, just so that you'll know some things to be thinking about and paying attention to. Now, we've talked about the scholar profile. I want to talk about transcripts. Very important. If you don't know how to get your transcripts from your high school or your child's high school, find out as soon as possible. Schools have processes, they have fees, they have many different things that you might have to be mindful of just to get a physical copy of their transcripts in your hand. And if you don't know what that process is, it will likely slow you down when you need to get transcripts the most. Don't wait till you need to send out transcripts to know what that is. Find out early and do everything ahead of time that you can to position yourself to be able to request them and get them out. Request them and get them out. That was extremely helpful with both my boys. So that's the transcript. Now, the next part of the scholarship application are your SAT and ACT scores. Now, as I mentioned, many colleges may not be requiring SAT and ACT scores. Some scholarship entities may not. But guess what? If you have an opportunity to still take the SAT and or ACT, I would encourage you to do so, because colleges and scholarship entities, some of them are still using those scores to give out money. Well, wait a minute, Ms. Christie, you just said they weren't using them. They're not using them always for college admissions. But sometimes you have some colleges and some scholarship entities that are still saying, if you want a merit-based scholarship from us, we'll need to see your scores. So if you have an opportunity to take them, I would encourage you to do so. And here I simply listed the registration websites for both the SAT and the ACT tests. So the next part, I'm going to talk about these two parts kind of together. I'm going to talk next about essays and letters of recommendations you'll likely see on the scholarship application. And I'm talking about them together because most students only think about essays and letters of recommendation when they're trying to apply to college, when they're filling out the college applications. Wrong. You'll need them in 2 different ways, and they're not the same documents. You'll need them for college admissions. You'll need them for scholarships as well. You're answering 2 different questions with your essays and letters of recommendation. If a college says, hey, give us an essay and a letter of recommendation with your application, they want to know, why is this a good candidate for admissions? The key word is admissions. They're going to be written with that slant to it. If an entity wants to, they're requiring an essay or letter recommendation for a scholarship, they're asking the question, why should you be awarded a scholarship, our money? That's written with a different slant. I am writing this letter of recommendation for Christie because I strongly recommend that you award her your scholarship. That's different from me recommending that you admit her to your college. So when you're reaching out to entities for letters of recommendations, you should ask them for two types of letters. The same teacher. I need a letter for scholarships. I need a letter for college admissions. And when you are personally writing essays, you should be writing them with two different mindsets. One with the lens to get into college, and then you may be able to tweak them and have a separate essay, similar topic, but a different slant focused on how do I get awarded scholarship money. So that's the reason why I talk about those together. Now, in the context of a scholarship application, I'm going to talk a little bit about essays. Very important, which we've talked about. Some entities are really putting a lot of weight on those. If they tell you to submit them in a particular way, follow the directions, please. This is not the place to be creative with your fonts or with your style and do your own rogue thing. If they say type it, then you type it. Simply put. If they say handwrite it, you handwrite it. If they say don't go over a certain word count, let's say 500 words, don't give them 501 unless you want your application not to get considered. Strongly, very simple to do, but you'd be surprised. I see it all the time. Get your essays written early. Don't wait till the last minute. Get somebody to proofread your essays. Somebody who can actually write and someone who actually has good grammatical skills and good critical thinking skills who can challenge you on not just how you say it, but what you're conveying. And make sure that you write on the topic they give you. There's nothing worse, and I've evaluated scholarships applications, and I ask a student to write about their leadership skill, and they tell me about why they like to ride a bike. Unless you made a strong, obvious connection to bike riding, you can't follow directions and you're off track, and I'm no longer interested in your application. So please be focused and concise and stay on topic. And the good news about essays is you can reuse the content over and over again. You do not have to create a new essay on leadership every time someone give you new instructions. You can recycle that same leadership. I have different categories working with my son. I have him let me see if I have that slide in here. Yep, here it is. These themes at the top, these essay themes, whether it's tell us about why you chose your major or pick this career field, he has an essay already on that particular topic. He can tweak it if the entity asks him a slightly different question, but 90% of what he has to say is already written. Save it and you can do the same. You'll likely get essay themes around writing a personal statement. This will give you the opportunity to really shine and talk about whatever you want in some instances. You may have an opportunity to write about a challenge you experienced, or tell us why you have a financial need, or how have you experienced change. A lot of students right now, when they're getting challenge questions or writing on COVID-19 and the pandemic, that's fine. And I'll tell you two things. And I heard someone say in an interview just yesterday, who was a college admissions official. She said, those who are reading those kind of letters and essays are getting depressed because students are generally writing about the hardships with COVID, which is fine. But here's what Christie would recommend. If you're depressing your evaluators, then you're going to have to bring that back full circle. You can talk about a challenge, something that really hit you hard or hit close to home for you, but don't focus there. Don't just stay there. Come out of that with your writing and talk about how you overcame the adversity, how it made you stronger, how it changed your perspective, something more compelling than just the problem or the struggle. Very, very important in your writing. I'll give you an example. My son, he talked about not being able to play football for a year due to COVID. Not directly about COVID, but COVID affected him not being able to play football, and how he turned that into something positive and constructive. he started his own photography business. He was at home. He had a lot more free time. So he used that to do something else. So that's a great example of problem, put it in the context, how you overcame it, how did you use it for good. Another way with your essay writing is always talk about what you want to do. Always end an essay with what do you want to do to make a difference beyond just yourself. That $1 million scholarship winner I talked about earlier, that's exactly what she did. She shared with me that, yes, there are scholarships. I'll answer that separately. But she shared with me that she reached out to find out what, from those scholarship mentors I talked about, they told her, one of them told her that what you want to do is make sure you say in your writing how you plan to make a difference in your community or society or with your career field or profession. So I highly would encourage you to do that. Now, Vanessa, I talked about it earlier. How do you find a scholarship mentor? That question came back up again. Two ways. Go to websites where you can look for previous recipients. Let's say your son or daughter wants to apply for Coca-Cola scholarship. If you go to the Coca-Cola website, they have all these scrolling pictures of names and students who won, who are past recipients. Find a way, do some research, have your child do some research. They can find all kind of creative people on social media. So task them with that project. Have them look for that student on social media. Maybe it has a picture, match the pictures up with the names and find that student, DM them, as my kids call it, and have them reach out to them and ask them, hey, congratulations, I saw you were a Coca-Cola scholarship recipient. Would love to ask you some questions. Also, there may be local people in your community that you hear about, your friends on Facebook, other people's children on your social media pages who are celebrating, my baby just got a scholarship with X or Y. Reach out to that from parent to parent. Say, hey, you think your child would mind speaking to mine or speaking to us? Excellent. Use those network and natural organic connections you may have. I hope that helps. So I know that I want to leave a little time for Q&A, so I want to let me go ahead on and get through these next few scholarship application pieces. Letters of recommendation, very, very important. Make sure if you are a sophomore, fantastic. Listen to me. Start making a list now, sophomores, juniors, of which teachers, which community leaders, which employers, which coaches, which mentors you may have had who could write you powerful letters of recommendation. Make a list, update it every 6 months in the summer and then during Christmas break. Twice a year, sit down and spend 2 minutes. Give yourself 2 minutes and say, who can write a letter for me? Write them down or put them in your computer, save them to a file, and go back to it twice a year. Who else could write a letter? Put them in there and save it with their email address and their phone number. Put all that in one place. Here's why. When your senior year hits, who has time to try to think back to the teacher? What was her name from the 10th grade? You already have that because you're building on it. Same with the scholar profile. Created as a sophomore, and in the summer and in the winter breaks, update it. Save it and update it. What you'll find is you're reducing how much work you'll have to put in by your senior year. Your letters of recommendation is another great way for other people can celebrate you and highlight your accomplishments. Ask them for letters early. Don't wait till the last minute. I would say give them at least a 2-week heads up that you need a letter of recommendation, unless you just know that you need the application because you just found out about it. But if you're doing your job right, most scholarship applications, you'll have plenty of time to make sure you give them time to write your letters. Give them a copy of your scholar profile. And then keep in mind that you should be able to reuse letters of recommendation. When you ask them for letter of recommendations, you should make sure that you ask them for general ones. So the entity, instead of putting Stanford University or Coca-Cola scholarship entity, you might want to say, have them write it for Dear Scholarship Entity. That way you can use it for any scholarship. You can make copies of it, save it to your computer as a PDF. And every time you have an electronic package, you don't have to keep going back to them 15, 30 times. You can ask them permission to reuse that same generic letter. Most are happy to do that. because they generally don't want to write 30 letters anyway. And here's another Christie tip for you. This last bullet. Hope y'all paying attention. Offer to pre-draft the letter of recommendation. What? I got to write my own letter of recommendation? We doing too much here. Yes, you do. Here's why. You always want, and this is a life lesson for both students and parents, you always want to make it easy on people who are well positioned to help you excel. If you go, and I'm going to use, I'm going to pick on a parent. I'm going to pick on Miss, I don't know if Vanessa's a parent or not. I'm going to pick on Miss Tammy. I know she's a parent. Now, Miss Tammy is an English teacher, and I'm going to be a student. I'm going to come to Miss Tammy, and I'm going to ask her to write a letter of recommendation. And when I'm finished with my ask, Miss Tammy, you let me know whether you would say yes or no in the chat. Hi, Miss Tammy. I don't know if you remember me from your English 10 class. I'm in the process of applying for scholarships, and I would love it if you would write a letter of recommendation for me. Here is my scholar profile. This will give you a lot more information than you probably already knew about me to help with writing my letter of recommendation. And also, here is a sample pre-drafted letter of recommendation that I've already started for you. I can send this to you electronically, and you can tailor it and customize it to your desire as necessary. Now, Miss Tammy, my English teacher, let me know in the chat if you would be willing to write a recommendation for that child. She says yes with an exclamation point. Now, I will tell you this. Students who take this approach will likely be the first ones to get their letters of recommendation back from a teacher, employer, coach, whoever. I had this happen. I was watching football. I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan. One Sunday a couple years ago, a friend of mine, her son called me and said, Miss Christie, can you write a letter of recommendation for me? I said, well, sure. I'm thinking this is Sunday, football Sunday. I don't do all that on Sunday when Cowboys playing. He said, well, I'll email you my scholar profile. He used my model. He used my program. And he said, and I'll also send you a pre-drafted letter of recommendation that I started for you. Guess what? Cowboys took halftime. I pulled up his letter. I looked at his scholar profile. Oh, I didn't know. I knew this kid since he was probably 2. I said, I didn't know he was in that activity. I didn't know he liked that. From looking at his scholar profile, had the letter finished before halftime was over. I had printed it off, reviewed it one last time, signed it, scanned it back in, and he had his letter before halftime ended. Same day turnaround. Help people to help you. So let me know in the chat if you think that it's something you would be willing to do as a student. Write your own letter of recommendation. Now keep in mind, they're going to customize it themselves. So don't feel like you're being less than authentic by getting them started, by giving them a format, by telling them some things about you that you wanted to make sure were highlighted. But it certainly will give them an opportunity to streamline the time it takes them to help you out. Now, as I approach the end of my talk, I do want to highlight a few things. If you have not selected a major yet, I would encourage you to give that a lot of consideration, because it's your majors that's going to drive which colleges you apply to. Your majors, you're going to need your majors to go out and research which colleges have those programs. Once you have the major, once you've identified the colleges, you should be looking for scholarships. You, as a senior, you should be completing FAFSA. Now, I didn't mention this earlier, but let's say you apply for scholarships, or not scholarships, or financial aid, and the school sends you an award letter. You have time to review those award letters and appeal it if it's something that you think either is incorrect on your award letter, or you think they have additional funding that you are entitled to, or that they may have available to you, not entitled, but available to you. Use the process. Call them up on the phone, send them an email, and say, I would like to appeal my financial aid award letter. The worst they can say is no. The best they can say is yes, we've identified some additional funding. It doesn't hurt. Pick the college you want to attend. My son was at that stage when my son, who's currently in college, He waited till about May to finally pick which college he was going to attend. By the time he did, he had lost out on some financial aid, and he ended up in the worst freshman dorm. They give out dorm room assignments based on you committing to that college and you're paying your deposits and fees. So I would encourage you, all those things kind of go hand in hand. So you have to have a plan because these things are interrelated and they will help position you the best. So I would encourage you to select those colleges. If you're a senior, you should be picking the college. I know coming up on May 1st is National College Signing or College Acceptance Day. So now is the time for you to be narrowing that down, accepting which school you want, selecting the school and accepting their financial aid award. You have to literally accept it for that college you want to attend. Let them know, yes, I want your money. And then they'll have other steps and instructions to pay for enrollment and housing deposits. So those are some things I want you to be on your mind, particularly as you enter your senior year, that you'll need to really be picking up the pace with. Key takeaways. Don't let college funding be an afterthought. Make sure that you sit down with your parents or parents with your children and think about how you're going to pay for it and put together a system that works for you. Look for scholarships. I have a student who asked me recently, I did a TikTok video about this. A student says, well, how many scholarships do I have to look for? As if it was a nuisance to her. And she didn't have any funding and was trying to scramble to figure out how to pay for school. And she said, well, how long do I have to look for scholarships? Every day, often, until you graduate from college. Unless you have all the money you need for all 4 years, you have a unique opportunity to look for scholarships every year while you're in college. I would highly encourage you to do so. Track your progress and make sure, most importantly, not most importantly, but equally importantly, get organized. Parents and students, have a place where you can, a folder on your computer, create a place on your computer where you and your child can find your documents. My son also has a physical folder. Everything my senior has for college is in this one folder. I don't know if you can see it, but if you can, it's in here. And here's what I'll tell you. He can come to my desk in my office and he can pull up that folder and we both know where to find all of his documents. You're going to have access to a lot of online portals and accounts. Save all those username and passwords in a central place that both the student and the parent, you can both access. There's nothing worse than having 30 to 50 places and everybody has a unique login and you cannot remember them when you need them the most. And lastly, create a separate email address like I did for my son. I found his generation was not using email, checking emails daily. So I said, time out, we're not doing this your senior year. We created one Gmail account. It has his name at college, college at gmail.com, whatever you want to name it. And we both have the username and password. We both check it daily. We're not going to miss opportunities because nobody is paying attention to communication. Most colleges and most scholarship entities are communicating with students via email. So please make sure you have a mechanism in place to make sure you're being timely and responsive. Now, my biggest pet peeve, don't waste people's time. If you have people, your parents, your teachers, school counselors, recommenders, if they're going to help you in this process, please be responsive. If they say, hey, Ms. Vanessa, I need you to send me your son's transcript, or if you're a student, I need you to send me your transcript by this Friday, and you don't send it until the following Wednesday, don't look for that opportunity to still be before you. People are willing to help you, but you need to give them something to work with, and you need to respect their time. They're busy people, and they may be helping multiple people, and then it further diminishes their capacity to help others when they have to keep chasing behind you. In fact, if they ask you for a deadline to have documents to them and it's Friday, get it to them earlier than Friday. Be that responsive. And finally, say thank you to your parents, most importantly, but to your educators, to your school officials, to anybody in your process who is helping you to achieve your college planning and college funding goals. So with that being said, I am pretty much at the end of the talk, and I'm happy to take questions. You can visit my website if you want my reference materials. And the books and workbooks will be available through Ms. Robinson. I am including some useful links for you. And please know that all of these, many of these slides, not all of them, but many of these slides will be available to you in an email tonight after the webinar. You'd be able to click on a link and it will take you to a location on my website where you can download the slides to get a lot of these links that and tools that I reference. Also, if you have questions about essay writing and other topics as depicted here, subscribe to my YouTube channel, Invest in Others, and you'll be able to watch any of these past webinars. I would strongly encourage you to watch the one on essay writing as you're thinking about getting those essays together. Very, very powerful, in-depth discussion on essay writing, more than what I was able to cover tonight. I would love for you all to follow me on social media, Facebook. Most students aren't on Facebook, but Twitter, Instagram, and I'm now on TikTok. So follow me. I do post a lot of information and tips that I find, and I try to quickly get those out there to the community. And lastly, I would love your feedback. Let me know how you think this conversation went. Hopefully you felt comfortable asking your questions, and I know there's some questions I still need to answer here in just a few minutes. If you have your phone, please feel free to use the QR code. If you don't, I just put the link to the survey evaluation in the chat function, and it'll also be in the email that I send you tonight. So you have 3 different opportunities to complete the survey. It'll take you 2 to 3 minutes at the most. I think it's like 10 questions. Lastly, are there any questions? Now I'm going to take it off of just because I would love to see a few faces. Excellent. There are people out here. Awesome. Hi there. So I want to take some questions from the group, and I do realize that I missed some good questions. I'm going to try to go back in the chat to answer questions that I may have seen. Someone asked, can juniors start applying for scholarships? Good question. Freshmen, 8th graders, 9th graders can start searching and applying for scholarships. I have found some scholarships where you did not have to be a senior to apply. What happens if you can apply as a sophomore and already get scholarship funding, and you can put that to the side and save it for your senior year? Excellent. So please know that when you read about each scholarship will tell you specifically what the eligibility requirements are. If they say you can apply as a freshman, sophomore, junior, don't wait, apply. Great question. Someone else said, that's great. I'm over 18 years out of this process and that has helped. So this has helped. Okay, great. I'm glad you found this helpful. Share it, pass it along to other students who, anything you've learned, please share it with other students and family members who you think it could benefit. Let's see. There's a question about who can get scholarships. One of the things I do want to specify, there are scholarships out there for students who have so many different skills, talents, abilities, and disabilities. And I don't want to call out any particular disabilities. Medical issues, there's scholarships for. If there are learning disabilities or learning challenges, there are different scholarships out there specifically targeted at helping and giving access and opportunities to individuals with unique needs. So please do an exhaustive search and make sure you're looking for scholarships to fit your unique situation. Let's see. My son's guidance counselor is amazing. Someone said my son and I have a system, a spreadsheet, and a binder. He's been applying to schools. Oh, I lost it. Applying to schools since March of 2020. He's tired of scholarship Sundays. Oh, I love that, Miss Tammy. Scholarship Sundays. My son's going to be mad because I'm going to steal that from you, but he will appreciate it later. And you're right. You know what I tell students? Either you sacrifice now or you sacrifice money. Sacrifice your time now or you sacrifice your money later. And I'll tell you what, if you position yourself well now, you can have a positive, you can have a less stressful college experience when you can take the funding weight off of your shoulder, and you can focus on your academics, your social, enjoying your college situation. So as much as possible, I encourage and advocate for students leading this process and parents being there to support and aid, not the other way around. You guys have more free time than we parents do. Use it. Like I tell my son, my high schooler's doing classes virtually now too. And I'm like, you have more free time than I do. He spent his spring break looking for scholarships. Not all day, every day. He probably spent an hour a day. If you can't spend an hour a day, 10 minutes a day helping yourself, why would you have an expectation that anybody else would do that for you? Just my take on it. So I'm going to open it up. Are there any other questions that I might have missed? If so, please come off mute, or I'm happy for you to type it into the chat. And if you don't feel comfortable speaking, please let me know if you have any questions. Everybody has all their money situations figured out?
Yes, hello there. I just have a quick question about the FAFSA. So my son is a junior right now, and for his senior year, that's when I can start applying for the FAFSA, and it's in October, you said?
Yes, ma'am. So October 1st, the new application for that financial aid year will open up, and October 1st or 2nd, I will be applying for my FAFSA.
Okay, thank you.
But the other thing I want to mention to that, juniors who are rising seniors, don't, read my lips, don't waste your summers. You're not in school, you don't have activities, you don't have academic coursework to compete with. Get ahead of a lot of these things this summer. Narrow down your top 2 or 3 majors. Pick your top 5 to 10 schools you want to attend. Because when that September, October time period hits, you're going to have to fill out that FAFSA. You're going to need to have already backed up to which schools I want to attend in order to be able to provide that with your FAFSA and other key milestones your senior year. You can research colleges this summer. Make a list. If you saw my first webinar for Caldwell Tech back last month, I talked about your college search tracking sheet. Make a list of the colleges, how much the tuition is, when their deadlines to apply, what are the requirements to get in. And when you have that, you'll be able to use that to help with your FAFSA, to help with your SAT. If you take the SATs, you're going to send your scores to those same schools. So you need to know what those colleges are to be able to position yourself to do those next steps. This summer would be excellent. So once you research those colleges, any particular reason why you can't have your essays written over the summer? Who wants to write an essay during the fall of their senior year? I know I wouldn't. But if I can spend a day during the summer, maybe a week during the summer, maybe write 5 essays during the summer. Let's say I wanted to apply for 5 schools and all 5 schools had an essay. I would write their essays first before I even apply. Write them, get somebody to critique them, take a step back from them, sleep on it a little bit. Oh, I can add that to my essay. Tweak it a little bit more. By the time you're ready to apply to school, the worst part about that, the essays, is already done. So maximize your summers. And if you do a little each week, you will find that you will not have to do a lot at any other point in time your senior year, except apply for those scholarships. Apply, apply, apply. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Going once, going twice. All right, well, I will turn it back over to Ms. Robinson. Thank you all for your time tonight. Check out my website, the templates are there. You'll also have them in the workbook that you'll be receiving from Ms. Robinson. And if there's anything else I can do, I'm happy to assist. So Ms. Robinson, I'm turning it back over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm getting texts all over the place saying that how much information it was and how appreciative everyone is. I just want to close by saying, you know, I too have a junior in my house that has to go to college, and it's tough. It's tough because it's a lot of choices that you have to make, and I feel like this is mandatory, and it's never too early to start looking. There was so much information. All of this information can be reiterated in the books. I will give the books to either your vice principal or your principal, and they'll make sure that you get it. Again, thank you, Dr. Murray, for all of your time. Thank you look at Miss Archangelo. She was there being the sponge.